Добрий день.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us in the studio. My name is Oleksandr, and it's my pleasure to receive you at Ukraine Media Center. Today is day 916 of the full-scale invasion. It's been 11 years of the war, and today we have gathered here to discuss a very important project. Today we will be talking about the Crisis and Legal Support Hotline for veterans and their family members, an important project to discuss. So let me introduce the speakers. Joining us in the studio are Yulia Kirillova, acting executive director at the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation. Also joining us is Oleksandr Chamorsov, veteran, chief psychologist of the Crisis Support Hotline, and Veronika Kozhemiakina, expert of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, head of the legal department, lawyer. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, Yulia, the floor is yours. We know the project was presented on the 27th of June, so there are results to discuss. So how successful the project is so far. So first of all, thank you for sharing this day with us. Thank you for having me here. Today we want to share the first results of the operation of our crisis hotline that was established back in June 2022, and it was working 24/7, supporting the veterans, the members of their families, and we were just increasing and growing our potential, involving more and more colleagues and partners. And today we are going to tell you about that in brief. Also, I would like to thank the Ukrainian Quick Reaction Fund and the IREX program for Veterans Reintegration and the State Department of the United States for the funding of our hotline. They have been supporting us in our work for the last 2 years, and obviously we continue our work, and our hotline is always in touch with our veterans, both male and female. Well, you know, in Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, every project and every initiative that we try to implement for our veterans is based on profound research of needs and challenges that veterans are facing. And based on the results of those profound research, we create key products that are supposed to work for the veterans, both male and female, and the members of their families, the family members of those who laid their lives to defend their homeland. And our hotline is one of such products. Because during the hot phase of the war, when all of us were going through the most difficult periods of our life, because many lost their homes, many had to leave, many lost their family members, the family members of many were mobilized, they took up the arms to defend our homeland in the front lines. We were all going through difficult periods again, and we decided to establish this crisis hotline that would support those thanks to whom our independence and our sovereignty still exist. So we started this hotline. It was a telephone hotline. First we were working just a couple of hours per day, and then we were trying to expand more and more. And then in a couple of months our hotline started such a 24/7 marathon to support our veterans. And it's been 2 years that we don't stop for a single minute. The hotline haven't ceased its operation for a single second. It was continuing to support our heroes, both male and female. Also, we were analyzing the reports we were getting, and we were trying to research those profound needs in order to try to understand how can we better support our beneficiaries. And this is when the support groups for veterans, both male and female, emerged. There was a huge need for such support groups in terms of support of the family members of those who died in the front lines. They are one of our key audiences, and we use all of the efforts to support them, because the veterans, they give the most valuable that they have, and the heroes who led their lives, they gave everything, and it's our responsibility to take care about their families who stay here in the rear with us. Then we've established those support groups. We were working, we were expanding, we were growing the number of groups, the number of people in the groups. We were trying to engage more and more people whom we can support. And having analyzed the appeals, we realized that we get a lot of requests for legal advice. And this is when we've established this legal advice on our hotline. Today we have lawyers working in our hotline, also providing legal advice to our veterans, both male and female. And you know, it's really such a complex approach that we use in our work. It's incredibly important because reintegration is not only made of psychological support, it's the number of steps that is supposed to be developed and made and provided to our defenders, both male and female, so they can easier reintegrate back into civil life, so that they can help others reintegrate. And obviously our hotline, it already gained certain reputation among the veterans. Our hotline is recommended by them to one another. Also, it's on the list of the initiative of the First Lady Olena Zelenska, the all-Ukrainian mental health support program called How Are You? And it's incredibly important for us because we have other programs aimed at support of the veterans, trying to partner with us, and we try to support them too. Our mental health specialist, specifically Mr. Oleksandr, made the training for the representatives of the administrative support centers at this stage of development of this project implementation of the joint windows for the veterans. So Oleksandr was telling the representatives of administrative support centers how to properly communicate with the veterans. That's an incredibly valuable experience that we happily share with the others, to make sure that our defenders get provided high quality complex support on all of the stages of their reintegration. What else can I say? I have to definitely share some numbers with you, because since the start of the program, and it's been more than 2 years, we've processed more than 32 addresses, and they are not only requests on the hotline. Those saved lives, because as we were preparing our reports, as we were getting interventions, we were communicating with the team. Those were the calls to ambulance. Those were the attempts to prevent suicides. It was just the support of people who didn't know just what to do, how to save themselves, how to protect themselves, how to move on with their lives. It's about finding sense of life. It's about the fact that any single person, even at 3 o'clock in the night, can get this support. It's about respect. It's about respect and gratitude that we express every day and every night to those who bring our victory closer. That's why let me give the floor to my colleagues, because I can talk about this hotline around and around for hours. So once again, thank you very much for coming, and let me give the floor to my colleagues. So Mr. Oleksandr, the floor is yours. Please tell us, how does this crisis support hotline works for the veterans and their family members? We understand how important is this component for their renewal and rehabilitation. Thank you very much for such a high evaluation, the words about the importance, and I won't be very original, and I would like to start with the words of gratitude. Thank you for coming. Thank you for finding this opportunity. I see my colleague from the front line here. Thank you, Vlad, for coming. Since the hotline, as Yulia has said, works 24/7, not everybody was able to attend, because if we call this number 0800332029, we will get a response from my colleagues who are on duty over there. And it's clear I want to thank the representatives. I hope we have representatives of our donors who provide us with opportunity to work, and I would like to thank my colleagues from the government hotline who joined this event today. And also I would like to thank everybody who's waiting for our defenders who are still in the front lines, and the defenders themselves for what they're doing, for defending me and my family, and providing me and my colleagues with the opportunity to work in this hotline. Thank you very much. And also I would like to thank those who are already back, who are already veterans, who have gained this status already, and a couple of words about the hotline. But in any case, we have some free time in the end during the Q&A session, but I think it would be normal if these questions to me arise as I speak, so I'm ready to answer them right away, to digress, because it's no digression. Everything is about the topic of our today's conversation. So Yulia has already told you how long the hotline has been operating, and I was coming to work first as an advisor to the hotline. I have been working as an advisor for a certain period, and then I've been appointed a chief psychologist, and there was a period when I was both advising on the hotline, and I was the head of my team, of my unit, made up of 14 people. Now I'm just a head psychologist. I'm a little bit sad about that, because sometimes I want to advise people, but I find other options to advise my beneficiaries, because my beneficiaries are either military or the veterans who have already retired, both male and female. So as I was coming to the front line, I already had that experience, and I already have this experience of advising on hotlines, because I still take shifts, and there is another hotline where I work, Lifeline Ukraine, hotline to prevent suicides, and I still take shifts there. I continue this practice. So I had this experience before I've come, but there was a training before we started working in the hotline, and I assess this training as a high quality training, because even with my experience, it was interesting for me. There was a lot of things that I basically either didn't know or I've learned from a different perspective. And after that training, both me and my colleagues, we've started actively working. And basically from the very beginning, there was also an opportunity to provide legal advice to my colleague. Is going to give you more color on the legal support side. It was not like a direct advice live, but still you could fill a form and the lawyers could respond providing legal advice. By the way, I was using that opportunity myself, and in case of necessity I'm about to use it again. And now during daytime we have legal advisors to whom we forward legal requests, and it proved to be quite an efficient practice because well basically it's up to my colleague to say that they get such a number of requests that sometimes they don't even have enough time to process them, and that there is a line, there is people are lining up to get legal advice. It's quite an important area we have to develop. And talking about the consultant itself, there is no some special magic around it. It's based on the principles. Basically, my colleagues from the government hotline are familiar with those principles of telephone consultation that have been existing for a long time. It's crisis support, crisis advice, here and now, when people call us in crisis condition and they get psychoeducation, they get explained their condition, and then they get stabilized and then forwarded as required to the specialists. Or sometimes such advice may suffice for the people, just a couple of calls to the front line, and our beneficiaries say that it's sufficient for them and they got what they wanted. And talking about the traditional nature, we have such a zest in our hotline. The support groups that Yulia has mentioned, I don't really know, maybe you know other hotlines that go in parallel with the support groups, but I'm not aware of any. I think that it's quite a successful innovation when my colleagues recommend to somebody that they can get to that support group. People go there. They have such an opportunity as they visit the website of Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, then can sign up. We have 4 support groups in effect now for the veterans, both male and female, and their family members. This group has been existing for a long period. Then another group is for those who've lost their friends or relatives recently. Then the third group is a group for everybody who needs support caused by the suffering caused by the war. And group number 4 works according to the certified program. Is for those who lost their loved ones after 4 or 5 months. Our colleagues help them to adapt after this loss. It's a Norwegian development for what I remember. I was undergoing this training too, as well as my colleagues, and we were all certified for this program. It's called 8 Steps program. It takes place offline in Kiev, and there is a long line there, so even if one signs up, they need to wait until the start of the new group. So this is something that's different about our hotline, because, for example, those who call to the hotline, they get to the support groups, they see those who either was advising them on the phone or about to advise to them, because the coaches in our support groups are the same my colleagues from the hotline. So it's 2 or 3 coaches per group, and a person who called to the hotline before may agree with the coach, having information when the coaches have shifts in the support groups, as long as they establish trust, so they can call and talk to the same coach again and again. So it's not only as they call once only in crisis condition, but it's a whole different level when the beneficiaries talk to specific specialists, continuing and developing some specific topic. I would like to see those levels developing, because on my end and on the end of my colleagues we have some interesting ideas, but it's more of a question to our donors, because all of the ideas, they have some financial foundation, and we know that usually we have restrictions on funding. I mean, it's clear to me in my head, in my conscience, but it's not always clear to my heart, because I would like to help to the most extent possible. I want to invest all of myself there, because we have the idea of the 5th support group, and also there is an idea of implementation of a 3rd level individual consulting, but those are only the ideas, because again they have to be backed up financially. Mr. Oleksandr, Ms. Yulia has mentioned that 32,000 requests is the number of requests you got on the front line. So what was the number of those requesting mental health support, and what is the type of request that you process, if you can classify them? Well, traditionally the requests for mental health support account for majority. So the legal questions, they exist always, but they can come in parallel. First, a person gets mental health support, crisis consultation, and then we proceed to consultation with a lawyer. So the majority is the mental health support request, and now this number is pretty stable, because I put together my reports on a weekly basis. I see those numbers, and the division is like into such groups. This is how I divide them for myself, because I read the cases of my colleagues. They describe the most important and the most, so to say, interesting cases, and I see one of these areas, traditional, the adaptation to the peaceful life. A person who comes back, I was going through it myself, they feel it quite different to get used to adapt to the peaceful life, because they feel abandoned, they feel not needed by everyone, lost, and just like to me, it seems to them that the world has changed and the world does not accept them. But in reality, those were the changes that happened to me, and my colleagues explained the beneficiaries about such changes, and it's an important component of the consultation itself, because to me that explanation back in my day played probably a key role, because I've realized that it's not about something wrong with my head, that it's a normal reaction to those circumstances, to my experience of war. That's a normal reaction, and after that it becomes way easier. So for me it was about like 60-70% when I've realized that my task is the further adaptation. And again, adaptation to these peaceful conditions. So just as I've said, it's one of many parts of the request that is incredibly important. The difficulties in adaptation to peaceful life. Yet another type of requests is the feeling of the experience of feeling of guilt, because when I've come back, for example, I still don't have opportunity to go back to war. I cannot do it physically. I cannot fight directly with the arms in my hand, and I'm having this intense feeling of guilt because I cannot do that my brothers in arms are dying there in the front lines and I'm sitting here in the rear. Yes, that's a very important part, the work with this feeling of guilt. And as Yulia has mentioned, the search for new senses in life, like how can I, having those opportunities, still be useful? That's yet another part. And another huge part is the requests coming from the family members who are waiting. It's difficult for them to wait. It's difficult to maintain relations on a distance. Those who wait are aware for them. I'm definitely not saying something new for them. And it's obviously difficult to experience loss. I classify them as the same group. So those who experience loss, we get requests from them, we stabilize them, and we recommend them to attend our groups or work with the psychologists. And another part of requests is the dependencies or addictions. I think it's an incredibly important challenge for those who are coming back and for those who are still serving, and the desire to overcome those addictions. Again, such requests are coming too. Thank you very much, Ms. Veronika. Let's proceed to the legal advice area. So what are the requests that you're getting on your end? Good morning, everybody. I would like to start with the words of appreciation. Thanks everybody for coming, and I would also like to thank our defenders, first of all, those who get back to civil life and try to attempt living the lives they used to have before. But as we see, both from legal and psychological perspective, they're not always successful in doing so, and I rejoice in having such projects using which we can help our veterans reintegrate back into civil life and try to live it to the full, just like they used to do before the war or before the full-scale war. So talking about the legal side of our project, it's worth starting with the fact that legal advice started back in December 2022. I was there in the beginning. We only had 2 lawyers, but we were trying our best to provide legal advice. First, they were in writing, and in cooperation with IREX and Quick Reaction Fund, we started a cooperation in March 2024, and within this period, we've already processed more than 1,000 requests. Our cooperation has changed a little bit. We have spoken legal advice. It can be reached at the same phone number 0800332022. The psychologist switched to our line. They switched to the lawyer on duty, and the lawyers try to advise those people very frequently. Those requests are so complicated that the online advice just doesn't work because a lot of information has to be provided, and we try to switch to consulting in writing. We provide the guides, where to go, which documents to prepare, how to get the results, how to achieve the results. But judging by the number of oral requests, we understand there is a demand on side of the society. People keep coming, and basically the requests can be divided. If we're talking about the elder generation, they prefer speaking on the hotline or talking on the hotline, and talking about the younger ones, they address us through the website of Veterans Foundation, and they leave their request there. And on top of providing written consultations within our project, we have started the webinars, and we had 3 workshops on how to start your own business. We had webinars based on our pressing requests, the most popular requests, and I think that we had quite a successful case because there was a lot of questions after the webinars, and people were keeping coming, and judging by the number of views on YouTube, those webinars are posted on YouTube. Everyone can see them now, and I see they are interesting for the people. So for the time being, I could say there are 2 problems in our society: low legal culture all around Ukraine, and another problem is that the representatives of local governments and central government, they don't have culture of communication with the veterans, and they don't have empathy. And in view of these 2 problems, well, probably I would hate even to talk about that, but they still exist. And the story that we see, people don't know their rights. They come to some administrative offices, they get some harsh responses, and as we talk, and they leave. And as we talk to the veterans, we hear their dissatisfaction of this about the situation, because they fulfilled their duty in front of the state, and the state doesn't hurry to help them so they could obtain those social benefits that are due to them. And on top of providing legal advice and responding to written requests, we frequently provide legal materials as posts in our social network pages, or we produce guidelines or procedures, how to act to facilitate those procedures for the people so they can use those benefits that are due to them, or for example how they can obtain certain documents to confirm their status. So basically here you can see the way it looks. I've mentioned it's both spoken consultation and written consultation. Also, I would like to emphasize that we try to help people to put together reports, applications, and other types of documents, because frequently people don't even know how to put together a document, how to write a document. So talking about the successful cases, that's again one of the problems, that people don't really know how to properly formulate their report or application. Like that they frequently say, like, I'm not given anything, but frequently they never do anything to be given anything. So people were asking us for support, and people were getting results based on the processing of this or that application that we've helped them to submit. And the way I see the development of the legal support branch, it would be cool to have this opportunity to provide secondary legal advice on top of the primary, because sometimes people come with complicated cases and it cannot be finalized. I mean, we cannot only help with supporting them in putting together an application, because here we're talking about the accompaniment in the courts. During the court proceedings, we have specialists who can do that, but so far institutionally we don't have a way to implement this idea and to develop our legal support further on, because as we talk, for example, about court proceedings, they may last for years. Talking about the topics of applications or requests, I would talk about the way they can use their benefits. And first of all, the biggest number of requests is about acquisition of housing or compensation for not properly obtained housing, because the procedure for this housing acquisition, we were describing this procedure, how to apply for housing, and one of the veterans, he told us, I mean, I've read it all, I've read the procedure, I've read all the steps, but everything is so complicated, I don't even want to start. Also, we're having many requests about application for the certificate of the combatant, and the problem is people cannot get certificates or relevant paperwork from the military units. Sometimes the military units are disbanded, or sometimes there are some questions to the commanders of those military units. So we just help those people to obtain those documents. There's also a lot of questions with regard to medical commissions, because I understand as veterans end up in the hospitals, the first thing they think is the renewal of their health, and that paperwork thing is somewhere aside. But still those matters continue arising, and sometimes it happens that the documents were not properly drawn in the military units or military hospitals, or some stages of those medical committee examinations were skipped and they have to go through them anew. It's a big problem that is discussed a lot. I mean, it's not a secret to nobody. Talking about the veterans' benefits, they are frequently declared, but people frequently don't know just where to go to get those benefits, because the law contemplates a lot of benefits, but whether they are active or not so much people are aware about this. Also, there's a lot of requests from the family members of those missing in action and killed in action. The first problem they were facing is the verification of status. They have problems with acquisition of relevant certificates to be able to use the benefits, and there is also a number of questions around the financial disbursements. And on top of such issues inherent specifically with the veterans, our hotline is becoming so increasingly popular that many people start submitting requests not only related to the veteran status, but because we are getting requests about the family law and criminal law, so we try to forward the applicants for free support to other specialists. But again, we're trying to help everybody who's requesting us for such support. So basically that's it. Talking about the general questions, I can add a little bit about the activities that we had. We had two offline workshops in Poltava, Chernihiv and Sumy. There is a mistake here. And also we had webinars. Again, they were about the procedures in the medical examination committees, the legal status of the persons missing in action. We were trying to explain also about the prosthetics at the expense of the state and the expense of the donors. Also, we had about a webinar about housing. We were talking about the general procedures, and we were explaining our beneficiaries about all those housing programs that exist in the regions. Also, we had a webinar about the veterans benefits, how to use them, and we were talking about different statuses of the veteran and how they can be practically verified. So please visit our website or the page of Ukrainian Veterans Foundation in YouTube, and please watch the videos, those who are interested. Really important. Thank you very much for all that explanation. If you've just heard something that's important to you, please visit the YouTube page of Ukrainian Veterans Foundation. So if you have any questions or reflections on the floor, please let us know. Well, I don't know who can answer this question, but you've mentioned there were cases when you were saving people in the front line. Can you describe at least one case that was the most impressive to you? Well, Mr. Oleksandr, that's probably your responsibility. Well, based on the anonymous nature, I cannot tell you about the specific case that I may remember, but there is the procedure that's been existing for a long time. I know it's used in other hotlines too. It's when a person calls, and me as a consultant, I start understanding that a person can do harm to themselves or do harm to others. So I double check it with the client or a beneficiary, and if they verify this information, I tell them that our conversation ceases to be anonymous and I'm supposed to report them to the police or other agencies that are part of this procedure. So we had this case when a military was threatening to commit certain actions in relation of their commander, and we've taken decision to report to the police. And what happens next? Usually we don't know it. And basically my colleagues and me as a consultant, we're not supposed to be aware of that because we have a work to do. We have other beneficiaries, but for me, the key idea is that I fulfilled that procedure, that I've handed over the request to the law enforcement. Well, we had this situation. Yulia probably remembers about the situation, and she may add probably a little bit more about that. Well, Mr. Oleksandr really has told the way it happens according to the procedure. The relevant law enforcement agencies were reported, but again, this situation has become public, and that person was provided not only crisis consultation, but there was a response from the military unit and other institutions, and they provided that person with support, because a person ended up in a real difficult mental health condition. Basically, they called and they were crying for help. And I'm happy that this situation ended well and that person obtained the maximum of that support that they could count on. And I'm happy that that support resulted to be way more expanded beyond our procedure, because we had cases when we had to call ambulance. Well, because our hotline is anonymous and confidential, we cannot talk a lot about it, but we really had cases when we were preventing suicides, and during the hotline consultation, we were helping people to find the sense of life, find strength to move on, to build those small steps, how to overcome the loss, how to move on with all those circumstances, with all what happened in their lives, and it's incredibly valuable. I want to thank all of the specialists who work in our hotline. That's an incredible work, a titanic job they're doing 24/7 again. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have more questions on the floor. A microphone, please. Yeah, there's a live going. Dmitro Samoilov, military lawyer. I represent the Monday Foundation now, and I have a couple of questions to Mr. Psychologist and Ms. Lawyer. Let me start with the psychologist. I have such a question. Do you have a practice and experience? Do you have people requesting you, the relatives of those missing in action? One case is when there is a report about a person killed in action. The procedure is clear in this way, no matter how difficult is the loss. But when they get a report that their brother, son, father was missing in action, and then there are his brothers in ours who say, like, we've seen them die, so you can start this procedure. But the military unit cannot provide relevant information and relevant paperwork, so people are still considered to be missing in action, and in the majority of cases the military unit are not allowed to talk to the relatives in that case. So the question is, what the relatives should do. Should they wait for their relatives to come back, or should they seek their recognition as killed in action? So did you have any cases on consulting of the relatives of those missing in action? That's the first question, and I will have another one afterwards. Well, usually people submit requests to us because they want to know the procedure, what to do in those cases, and I would divide people into categories in this case, because we have requests from those who think that their relatives are still alive and they want to keep looking for their relatives, and they ask to provide algorithm to provide the procedure, what steps need to be taken to stimulate the investigation and search for that person. And others, they think on contrary, that their relatives have died and they want to initiate the procedure for seeking recognition of them as killed in action. So some might say that we're gonna look for them as long as it takes. They don't want to recognize their relatives dead. And talking about the procedures, there are standard, well, not like standard, but there is a list of organizations who are involved in search for the people, and there is the specific procedure to recognize a person is killed in action, it goes through the court, and the question, it's a case-by-case basis. There is no specific standard. Every situation is non-standard, and we provide response based on the request of every single person. For example, sometimes a person says that the military unit doesn't want to undertake an investigation and provide relevant paperwork, so that's one kind of procedure, submitting complaints about the failure to initiate investigation. Or, for example, sometimes they say their relatives are missing in action and they don't even know what to do, that they need to submit a report to the police or something like that. And unfortunately, we cannot provide the full-fledged support, but as a case-by-case consultation, the relatives may request us, and for example, we may provide some advice, and they can go through some specific stage, but then they're lost on another stage, and we keep supporting them. But again, every military unit, every single family, it's a case-by-case thing, all the scenario is always different. But yes, we get such requests, and they are pretty numerous, yes. You had another question. Well, there is also a psychological aspect around it. We really have a lot of requests like this. We keep getting them to the hotline, and in my support group that I have for the veterans and their family members, there is a permanent participant who still believes that her husband is in captivity. It's been more than 1 year, and our task as psychologists is to emotionally support her. In no case we can provide any hope that yes, their husband is alive, or otherwise saying like, come on, it's been a long time, your husband is dead. No, that's not gonna happen. But talking about the activities to be taken, we forward them to the legal hotline, but we cannot prohibit that person to look for those they've lost through different channels. Well, you know about the existence of those channels. We cannot prohibit them, but we advise not to do so because it's very emotionally difficult, and we advise to use the official approach. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answers. Another question, it may seem a little bit weird, but our military who fulfill special operations, they end up in stressful conditions, and they frequently come up with the questions to probably not a therapist, but a sexologist. Anything can happen in the war, and as they come back from their missions, there is a risk to existence of their families. In those cases, do you consult such persons, I don't know, with legal advice or mental health support when they need support in about their relation with their families, with their wives? Well, talking about the family relations, obviously we get such requests. It's saving families on the distance, or otherwise it's about the end of the relations unilaterally by one party. And talking about specific questions related to sexology, we don't provide such advice in a telephone mode. That's clear. We forward them to the specialists who specialize in that, because we have like a general crisis support. But talking about the family relations, yeah, we discuss it a lot, and we help our beneficiaries if we have such an opportunity. Thank you very much. And another question to my colleague, Miss Attorney. I'm in agreement with you about the legal nihilism, but The problem is that it's not only military who don't know the law, but also their commanders, legal advisors, and talking about basic things like processing the disbursements or putting together the reports. Haven't you discussed or haven't you viewed an opportunity to establish a class for the commanders, deputy commanders of legal units, or legal advisors? I mean, when they get reports from their subordinates, I think it would, what should they do? It would save a lot of time for both the servicemen and the legal advisors and the commanders. Well, the fact is that on the cooperation with IREX and Ukrainian Quick Reaction Fund, we are unable to provide the help to the active military. It's more about the veterans and their family members of those missing and killed in action. So I agree that such training course would be very important and useful, and probably Ukrainian Veterans Foundation could consider such a product under a different program, because under this program we are limited with a grant agreement and we cannot provide this type of support. But again, the commanders themselves, as they train, and I know the way it happens from the inside, those who want to get trained, they get trained. But basically, if you open the field regulations, there are forms of all of the documents set forth there. So those who want to learn, they learn. And it's a matter of desire. Some may learn from what is provided to everybody, and for others you may hold 1,000 webinars and workshops, but if people don't want to learn things, they're not gonna do so. Well, do we have any more questions on the floor? Good afternoon, my name is Irena. I represent the network of legal development non-government organization. We provide legal support to broader circles of citizens. And I have quite a practical question. You've mentioned that there is a line when the requests need time to be processed, then both for legal and psychological support. And also you were mentioned that sometimes you cannot provide any support to people because they don't fall under specific categories, or their problems is way broader than those that you can cover within the framework of their legal requests. So I'm talking about forwarding and linking, whether you forward the people to the others or and another to the experts who specialize in different areas. And also, do you work in the communities within the regions under the programs that can support the veterans where they live? Because basically there is no limit to perfection. We have very good laws, but it all depends on the people who observe those laws. But if the people are left one-on-one outside the supporting circle, you know, this process becomes way more complicated. Well, first of all, I would like to say that talking about the line, you may imagine that this line takes a month, but it's not so. It's about an hour or two. If a person calls to the front line, they get their call returned in an hour number or two. And talking about the written request, we respond like within 3 days. What I take pride about this project is, like me and my legal colleagues, we process all of the requests quite promptly, and we get feedback that people say, like, we didn't expect to get a response so quickly on the very same day sometimes. And talking about linking and forwarding, well, we try to link the people to the experts in case of legal proceedings, because we understand we cannot do it by ourselves, because we get requests for those who are entitled to free legal support, and respectively we forward to such centers of free legal support. We find the telephone numbers for them by the regions, and I think if people come to us with a request, we cannot just say like we cannot do this or we don't have enough competence, so bye bye. No, in any case we try to link them to someone else, or because sometimes people don't really look for psychological or legal support. They ask whether they can get some social support, whether there are foundations where they can get some humanitarian aid from. We're looking for a list of charity foundations, because I think if people come to us with this or that request, all of those requests should be covered. Do we get such requests? Yeah, very frequently. We get requests from the veterans aides, and they have already learned how to use the forms that they say like, I represent this or that veteran from this or that community, and my question is as follows. So yeah, we get a lot of such requests. We had also requests from NGO. I've forgotten the name. It was last year. I apologize. So again, the veterans were forwarded to us. Whether we work with the communities, I don't know about the psychological support, but we don't have experience of working with the communities so far. In terms of legal support, probably we are about to develop some guidelines about how to work with the veterans in the communities. And let me add just a mental health component to it. As I was talking about the line, I was meaning, for example, that there is these 8-step groups. It's 8 different meetings, and there is specific number of members to the group, and then the group is closed. So if someone applies to this program, they need to wait until those 8 steps are fulfilled. But talking about the hotline, there may be only a line when somebody is advising another person, and then they call back, because we have such an option. We can call back to that number that we've missed a call from, and that's what's special about a hotline. By the way, talking about the communities, we had requests from the communities to hold this training on proper communication with the veterans, both male and female, because that responsibility was revested in the communities to provide the services to the veterans. That's why such a permanent cooperation may not exist, but all of the requests are being processed mostly, and we are open to cooperation with all of the communities. During all of our trainings, I provide the hotline telephone number, and I tell them you may ask our psychologist 24/7 on how to properly talk to the veterans. Another question, please. Good afternoon. My name is Oleksandr. I represent Desire to Help NGO. First of all, I would like to thank the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation for the opportunity to take part in this expert discussion. Thank you very much, Ms. Veronika, for the webinars. They are real interesting and captivating, and as a lawyer, I I'm getting tired of reading, and your webinars come in handy here. So my colleagues have already asked some questions that I wanted to ask, but using this opportunity, I would still like to probably rephrase and to ask Mr. Oleksandr, first of all, within the framework of your work, have you ever researched, or maybe you plan to research, so to say, the psychotypes of government officials who make decisions? Because frequently I had an opportunity to be a public servant, because when the talks start about allocation of state funds, they start requesting more and more paperwork. And the way out of this situation, I mean, the way that I find as a representative of an NGO, we understand that such situations may exist, and we request the ministries to provide the explanations. For example, why there is some type of documents, some type of paperwork requested to verify some statuses, and it stimulates the public servants either to read the regulations or to make decisions. Because I'm not a keen adherent of the court proceedings, I'm more inclined to pre-court resolutions, specifically in cases of veterans and members of their families. So again, that's a question to Mr. Oleksandr, the psychologist. Once again, the question is whether Mr. Oleksandr is aiming at describing the portrait of a government official, because it's a two-sided story, right? There is a government official on one side and a veteran on the other side, and there is a communication between them. The civil society organizations and a lot of other organizations are working on making the veterans aware of their rights, and my subjective opinion is that the veterans are entitled to get information about their rights from Facebook or any other web resources, but as long as they understand that they have that right and they come to an official with a stack of documents and there is the register of court rulings that contains a lot of complaints for failure of the government officials to act, because we in this case just generate court rulings of non-positive nature. So this is the question to Mr. Oleksandr, the psychological portrait of a government official. And another question to Ms. Veronika is, again, in continuation of this topic, my colleagues were already asking this question about any plans of further webinars, but we use those mechanisms that are available to us as a civil society organization. We request explanations from the ministers against every single document, and this is how we find ways out of situation. But again, just let me give you a short example. We got a request from a mother of a perished warrior to verify his status. The Interagency Commission has taken a resolution, so she went to the Administrative Support Center, and she called me and she said they refused to accept my paperwork. So what I have to do is I have to talk to that lady who refuses to accept documents. I cannot convince her. I'm a civil society organization. We're small. We're not known all around Ukraine. We're like Oleksandr calls and solves all of the problems, but we're not that kind. And I asked that lady to read carefully the last paragraph of an explanation that contains the list of the required documents. So she reads that paragraph, she then accepts the paperwork, and that mother of that perished warrior, that happened in Bila Tserkva, she calls me back and she says like, thank you, because this is the first time that they get this situation. And then this Center for Administrative Support is that they're going to use that procedure further on. They're going to use that explanation further on. So I have a question or maybe a suggestion to Ms. Veronika. Probably you try to use other mechanisms for the Social Protection Department or the pension fund or those administrative support centers, any agencies, any offices that are supposed to take some resolutions. You know, it's a government official. They don't make their decisions based on Facebook or based on my explanation as a lawyer. They only make their resolutions when they get this instruction from Kiev, from the ministry, that they can make such decision without any consequences. So we're talking about the individual consultations. So thank you very much for your question. Well, maybe such type of thing, you know, in my opinion, back when I was working as a public servant, we were using telephone meetings. We were sitting as lawyers, so someone was calling us from Kiev. We were listening to all of those problems from the regions, and at least it helped us to communicate, because some may have asked questions about some difficult issues of all Ukrainian nature. So this is how it worked on our end, on the end of the government agencies. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Oleksandr, can you try to answer the first one? Well, talking in brief, no, I didn't have such experience, and I don't intend to do so. The reason is because we're talking about telephone consultations and an anonymous nature, and in order to have such a research, we have to take a permission from those who call, and it's difficult to get such permission through the phone. We have a dedicated department who work with this problem, with this research, and if Ukrainian Veterans Foundation wants to make such a research, I think they're going to do it. So this is my answer. And Ms. Veronika, another question was to you. Well, in continuation of our cooperation, we had such an idea of webinars for the local governments and other government offices who are involved with the veterans. So there is a plan to develop certain training materials containing some brief instructions, brief description of the problems, so that those materials can be disseminated among the local governments and the central government agencies. So we do have such plans, but my personal opinion on this topic is quite subject to discussion. I don't agree with you, because the law clearly contemplates the list of documents. Everybody is familiar with them, and it's only about the human factor. Nothing new about the training or training materials can be set forth in those instructions, because there is law. We cannot amend it. We can only facilitate its use for the regular citizens, so those average citizens can read it easily, because sometimes it's difficult for them to understand what's written there. But those who work in the government offices, they're supposed to be familiar with that basic minimum, and I think we cannot teach them anything new. Talking about the psychological approach, yes. Talking about the fact that they should be aware of their job duties. Well, and just like I've mentioned, if people don't want to learn, no webinars can help them. Well, thank you, Veronika. So, Yulia, can we summarize what we have discussed today? Probably you have some plans to develop it, update it, and so on and so forth. Well, talking about the continuation of our project, as I've mentioned, our hotline started working 24/7 and it continues operating in that mode, and it will continue until that moment, just as long as our veterans and the members of their families need such support. Talking about the expansion of our work, definitely we plan to do so. We intend to continue providing the holistic support to more and more people. That's why we continue our awareness campaigns to make sure that the veterans know about the opportunities guaranteed to them by the state, by Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, our hotline. This is exactly what we work for. We work on having the consultation not only as consultation itself, but also it's about having that work done on a complex basis. We make profound analysis of requests we're getting. Ukrainian Veterans Foundation makes all Ukrainian surveys among the citizens of Ukraine. We ask the citizens what are the problems they're facing, what's needed, and we try to figure out how we can ensure the legal support and, like Mr. Oleksandr has mentioned, individual consultations in future, and we plan to launch all those things in the nearest future. But meanwhile, the hotline continues working in that format that it used to operate in. We provide crisis support. We have support groups for the veterans, for their family members, the family members of those killed in action. We provide legal advice. We continue supporting our beneficiaries in any difficult situations. We are looking for the ways to support them through forwarding, linking to our partners. We continue getting more and more partners involved to make sure that this support is of complex nature and it really helps our veterans on the way of their reintegration. Well, I would like to thank our speakers, our panelists. I would like to thank everyone who joined us. Thank you for the interest to this important topic. And obviously, I want to thank our security and defense forces, our veterans, both male and female, thanks to whom we can gather here to discuss these matters. So let's continue working together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Thank you.